greetings there, everybody. It's GleeCon coming back at you one more time with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On our last episode, we continued Cycles of Hatred, and we saw a poor orc fisherman get murdered by the burning blade as the tension continues to slowly percolate there between the Alliance and the Horde as we build up to World of Warcraft Classic. And on our side, we've been looking at this Warcraft role-playing game, a little oddity, a little uniqueness. We looked at the monster compendium kind of thing last time, and this time, stay a while and listen as we look at the Alliance and Horde Compendium. It's a fantasy source book. This is coming out now, I think, about a year and a half before World of Warcraft. So we're just going to zoom on through this whole book and check out what it kind of has to offer, but we're not going to read. We'll read the flavor text and we'll just kind of scan through some things. Here's some flavor text. Here we go. Varthol slumped against the massive head of a statue, its moss and vine-covered bulk fallen to the forest floor centuries before. Sated and exhausted, he calmed his breathing and for the first time took in his immediate surroundings. The trunk of a once mighty tree arched over the small clearing, one end emerging from a dark mound and the other resting upon the statue head. The sun slid toward the west, casting a soft red-orange glow upon the treetops that soared high above. The sustained rumble of a waterfall echoed from some distance to Varthal's left. With the clamor of violence ended, bird songs and the rustle of forest creatures started filling the air again. The Fellstalker lay lifeless upon the lush grass in the statue's shadow, Varthal's warglive embedded in the single eye that had glowered at him mere minutes ago. The creature's long mouth, filled with rows of jagged teeth, remained open wide as evidence of its startled, piercing death scream. As Varthal studied the beast, he saw that its skin, no, its entire form, appeared drained of color, sunken and even shriveled to the point where he could make out the shape of its ribs. What a chase! Images of their last desperate struggle replayed in Varthal's mind. The pursuit through the dense forest, the Fellstalker crashing into the clearing and howling in anticipation of a kill, the stalker leaping straight for Varthal, crouched in the darkness beneath the fallen tree trunk. Varthal rolling to his left, springing to his feet, sprinting to the clearing's far side. The stalker landing, surprised, then turning to face its prey. It crouched, ready for another leap, then lunged in explosive motion. It bounded once, twice, and Varthal's warglive materialized in a flash of metal, burying itself in the stalker's eye. The force of the blow flung the beast back in a twisted somersault to crash still upon the forest turf. Pushing away from the statue head, Varthal stood straight and proud. Every part of him burned with dark promise. He felt the demonic energy coursing through his veins, a searing song of magical power, power transferred to him when he put his hands upon the Fellstalker while its life ebbed away. Never had Varthal known such intensity, such raw force. "Bless the betrayer and this gift," Varthal whispered. If a mere Fellstalker could provide so much power, what about a Dreadlord or a Doomguard? What about one of the Eridar, or even one of those petty human mages? Jaina Proudmoore herself, perhaps? What about the Lich King? Varthal knelt before the Fellstalker's open maw and drew his warglive from the death wound. A wicked smile spread across his face as he stared at the blood trickling from the blade responsible for the beast's death. "Your kind feeds us now, demon," he said. "You will make the Blood Elves strong, so that we might repay those who abandoned us. Have no fear, though. I will tell the prince our tale. You shall be remembered." So I believe that sets the stage for what this book is going to be, which is kind of like an expansion. It's extra classes, maybe some extra races for this campaign. So looking at the introduction, we've got Pandaren fighting off against some orcs. Okay, so it just talks about the current state of affairs, the defeat of Grand Admiral Proudmoore. It just kind of sets the tone for what's happened. I don't think there's that much more, and instead of reading what's in the book, let's just find out by doing it. Chapter 1 is called The New Blood. That looks like Lich King. These are going to be the new races. Okay, cool. You can play as Wildhammer Dwarves. I love it. Very cool. Those look like Pandaren. They're part of the Alliance. The Blood Elves, love that as well. So you can make those as a caster. You can be a Furbolg. So that's one thing that World of Warcraft never tapped into. Can never be Firbolg, so that would be cool. They finally brought gnomes into the fray. That makes sense, and that is cool. So with this, we're adding some of the races. You can be Naga. Those two things, wouldn't that be cool to have Naga and Firbolg as real playable World of Warcraft races? I love it. I think mutations. Pandaren, eventually they did add those in. Jungle trolls, so basically trolls, are finally allowed to play as well. Makes sense, they should be. They added some prestige classes, Death Knight, which they do eventually add into the game. About dang time. Love it. And Demon Hunters, they do add that as an elite prestige type class as well. I think that's super cool, and they give them some powers and stuff. The Manual of Monsters is what the other was called. They also add a Dwarven Avatar. So that's neat, I guess, as they're starting to figure out their Titan Forged background. No, they don't ever add that in, but that would be cool. If they kind of like the way that brand becomes in Battle for Azeroth. And the Marksman, and obviously that's not a prestige class. That's kind of like an outlaw rogue. But no, they're just making them, they're very similar to some of the other ones. Necromancers, those don't really exist, but sure. Between Death Knight and Warlocks, you can have a little mixture of both, more Death Knight. A Primal. It says these are basically like berserkers with cleave. Okay. They get burning rage, so I don't know. War mages, that's cool, like a battle mage type of thing, but that's again that's more appropriate for a Dungeons and Dragons setting than World of Warcraft. Wind Rider, yeah, so that's cool. In the game you can fly, and they do have those in Warcraft, but it doesn't, yeah, have to play it as World of Warcraft. Okay, so there's a new skill, military commander profession, and some feats, balanced command, beloved commander, bullseye, control magic, courageous command, determined command, devour magic. Those are all feats that are mentioned above in those classes if you were scanning through. Drop cut, it's like an above attack. Evasive maneuvers, exotic weapon proficiency with siege weapons, expert flyer, fan of knives, love it. That becomes a rogue move. Feedback, find weak point, mounted archery, improved, great siege cleave, howl of terror. I think that's maybe a warlock move. Maybe it's priest. Initiate self-destruct sequence, plummet attack, range cleave, range disarm, range sunder, ricochet shot. We talked about that before. Ricochet whirlwind, ruthless command, siege cleave, spellbreaker, stand at death's door. So kind of like a last stand kind of thing. Steadfast command. Here's some Tauren and orcs charging. Steel magic. That is one. I think that's a demon hunter. Taunt. So we're finally getting some taunt in there. I like it. Transfer magic. Vehicle weapons expert and weakened structure. So that's cool. So just some extra races and classes. Some of them make it into World of Warcraft. Some do not. They've advanced choosing sides between the Alliance, which have the humans, the Ironforged dwarves, now the Wildhammer dwarves, the High Elves, they still exist, the Night Elves, the Gnomes, and Half Elves, which don't exist. Who's Final Golden Sword? It says, quiet rumors have existed for years about Grand Admiral Dalen Proudmoore's half-elf daughter, Final Golden Sword. However, unlike the recent gossip about Jaina Proudmoore's daughter, Jaina Proudmoore's love for the Orc Thrall, these rumors are true. In his youth, during military movements in Lordaeron, Proudmoore had several polite encounters with the High Elf sorceress Kilnar Golden Sword. Those polite encounters led to a handful of discreet liaisons that inevitably brought Final into the world. Proudmoore had married by that time, and Kilnar had agreed to keep the father of her baby a secret. I wonder if this exists in the real universe. Kilnar was a well-respected High Elf, and because of this, Final received better treatment than most of her kind. Her mother, raised among the High Elves in the wizard city of Dalaran, told her of her father's identity when she became fully grown. Having met Proudmoore several times and greatly admiring him, she decided to follow the path of her father instead of her mother and become a warrior. When the Scourge came to Dalaran, Finol was unable to stop the destruction of her home or the murder of her mother by Arthas himself. She resolved to remain in Lordaeron and rid the continent of the Scourge, a mighty task indeed. Most of the High Elves who remained after the battle embraced their magical highborn ancestry and became the Blood Elves. They would not stop to follow a half-elf. The humans who remained on the continent would not believe her when she claimed Proudmoore as her father. Proudmoore attempted to convince Finol to travel with him to Theramore to attack Durotar, but she refused, claiming his place was with her to free Lordaeron from the Scourge. He tried to convince her that the continent was lost to the undead, but she rejected his reasoning and considered him a traitor to his homeland. With her mother dead and father departed for easier battles, in her opinion, Finol remains with her small band of humans and those High Elves who rejected the path of the Blood Elves. Using guerrilla tactics, she picks off a Scourge encampment here, a caravan there. She's a strong warrior and thinks of nothing but her goal of freeing her homeland. Any half-elf who encounters Finol may wish to join with her. Fighting alongside a member of their race with such strengths of body and character, who doesn't have any hang-ups concerning where she came from, is a dream come true for some half-elves. So that's neat. So we'll have to look as we play through World of Warcraft. See if we encounter any half-elves at all. And if so, what's Finol Golden Sword all about? Okay, from the Horde side, of course, there are the Orcs. It says Orcs, Humans, and the New Lich King. There's Tauren. Now we can finally do Jungle Trolls. Makes sense. It doesn't say that much about it. Just how they're different tribes. The independent factions, of course, the Blood Elves. Oh, they're considered independent, but they will join the Horde. The Furbolgs, they're neutral. Makes sense. Goblins, they have not joined the Horde yet. Half Orcs, those don't exist. Naga, that would make sense that they were independent, but I like them better as the Horde and the Furbolg being part of the Alliance. Pandaren, love it. They're neutral, and that's true because they can be either. Besides, the Pandaren are just visiting. Let's look at this Pandaren. We're just going to read it to see what they've decided already. All of the races that reside on Kalimdor view the Pandaren with interest, claiming to come from an island named Pandaria, which no one has ever visited. These gentle beings bring their love for beer, their quiet contemplations, and their formidable fighting techniques to Kalimdor to experience life on the continent. Okay, I'm going to kind of veer off from there and not read this whole thing, but we've already talked about Pandaria now. Chapter 3, The Craft of War. Okay, so I'm guessing this is if you wanted to do let's see, if you wanted to basically tools for running mass combat. Yeah, so if you wanted to have Warcraft style battles in the Warcraft campaign, so they're adding a rule set for that, giving units if you wanted to control a bunch at a time. So if you're ever interested in doing like a tabletop massive RTS in the Dungeons and Dragons universe, here are some rules, kind of like Warhammer. It's pretty neat. And they're just giving rules on how to run that. So not necessarily interesting for us to read. We don't need to read about the rules of Warcraft, Dungeons and Dragons, but it's neat that it's out there, and just make yourself aware. Just look up the Alliance and Horde Compendium, and you can mess around with that on your own. This is tables for unit combat, so I think that's pretty cool that they've added that in. More just types of orders, types of actions you could do. Yeah, so just tons. So a big chunk of this book is how to conduct that type of thing, which is pretty neat. Yeah, tons. Big chunk of the book. Those are some Naga. So cool. Yeah, that's really what it seems like. The whole second half of this book is devoted to how to deal with battles at that level, which I do find interesting, but I have no interest in like reading 100 pages about that. Okay, as we kind of skim through, this mounted combat goes with that topic. Morale, that's something that is in some RTS games, but not in Warcraft 3. So interesting that you could add that rule. How terrain affects the combat. Just an index of terms. How to use magic on the combat as in a war type setting. Pretty cool. Yeah, so All right, so this is really pulling us through. So that jumps us all the way to the appendix. Let's just look. It says weapons of war. So these are the different weapons. It's all combined and made for the war. Ballistae, all types of different siege weapons. Some pictures of them: catapults, trebuchets, siege crossbows, the ammunition for them. That's it. That's the end of the book. Okay. So let's look. First of all, go back to the table of contents. Make sure nothing got cut out in this thing that I'm reading. No, there's not. There's an Appendix 2 legal information. They cut that out. And that is it. So, that's all. The Alliance and Horde Compendium, what did it do for us? It gave a few more races and classes, which brings us closer to the full catalog of what is available in the first few expansions of World of Warcraft and Classic itself. Still missing out on that Forsaken playable faction. That's a big one. And of course, Worgen haven't been talked about, and none of the special BFA races. We've looked at one interesting half-elven hero, neat little nug hidden in there. But really, 2/3 of this book is this is a source book on how to play Warcraft as a real-time strategy game using the Dungeons and Dragons rule set. So that's just kind of cool. So this is more like an oddity, but yeah. All right, guys. So as always, I appreciate you watching and listening as we kind of explore these little side non-canon things. But this episode of Lore of Warcraft is in the pipe 5x5.